So in this video, I'm going to show you how I took this Walmart wired bunny and made it into a table centerpiece. Super simple DIY. And all I'm using is the bunny itself, some nautical rope, and it really doesn't matter what thickness. There's a couple of different thicknesses that they have at the Dollar Tree or from anywhere, and hot glue, some ribbon, and that's pretty much it. So all I did was I decided which side I wanted to start with. I decided to go to the bottom of one of the side where the sides connected, and I kept the tape on the end of the rope that comes on it. You're not going to see it if you're going to decorate it with things, really. So I just started hot gluing and pressing that around. I do recommend that you use something to protect your fingers. There were several times during this that I had wished I had grabbed mine, but I just didn't feel like stopping to go get them. So I was just extra careful. And as I was going around, I thought if I have enough of this left, that I would probably go around and do a second time, add another layer around the outside just to cover the top edge of that bottom piece. But I didn't know if I was going to have enough at the time, so I just played it by ear. And when I got to the point where the wire on the other side met the bottom, there was enough room to go on the inside of the wire. I think I was using the thinner of the two nautical ropes that they sell. The 9.5 foot long rope is the one that I was using, but I don't know the thickness of it. I do know there's one that's 8 foot long that's a little bit thicker. So that might have been a little bit tighter to get in there. If you couldn't go on the inside, you could always go on the outside and just make sure you add some extra glue. And then when I ran out of that piece of cording, which really was just a piece that I had left over from a prior project, I went on to my next full length of rope. And again, after I secured the end by cutting off that last little bit or securing that last little bit and then gluing it in real good, that's where I could have really used the finger protectors. But I made sure all of the little pieces were glued on, and then I had to start a new rope, and I kept the tape on again, just glued it down right butt up next to the end of the old piece. And then I kept going. So now, once I get to the other place where the side meets the bottom, maybe I added a little bit of glue in there, but I basically just started wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. So there, I'm adding a little bit of glue down at the base. Every now and then I like to give it a little bit of glue as I wrap, but I don't do that on every time around. You just wrap and wrap and wrap, and thankfully, these pieces of cording aren't all that long, so you can keep it bunched together and just keep wrapping. But every 3 or 4, maybe 2 loops, I would put a little dollop on, try to make sure that it got stuck to the wire too, so that it stuck to each other as well as to the wire. And then I just tried to consistently wrap. So sometimes I would find that I was getting super, super tight, and other times I wasn't quite as pulling as tight. So I just tried to be consistent the whole way up, and I worked my way up to the ear. And then once I got up here, I decided to kind of go all the way across the bottom of the ear. I could either have started going right up and looped around, but then that would have skipped that little gap in between at the bottom of the ear. So I went all the way past the bottom of the first edge, or the first bottom over to the second bottom of the ear, the other side that meets the bottom at the ear. And then I just kind of made sure that I wrapped up that side and figured I would go up that side and down the other. And that way I already had covered the gap on the inside, or that little length that's on the inside of the bottom of the ear. But really, it's however you feel most comfortable. Some of the places, because of doing that, I had to kind of double up and go over a section again. But as long as I tried to do the same thing on both ears, it really didn't matter. And I knew that if I didn't get both ears perfectly, I was going to be covering them both with, or covering one of them with ribbon. So I knew that you wouldn't necessarily see any major flaws, at least on one of the ears. So you could decide which one you're going to put the ribbon on once you see how they turn out. But again, I worked my way up, and I do use a little bit more glue when I'm working my way up towards the tip, just to try to keep it in place. I don't know how necessary it is, but it just makes me feel better. And then especially at the top, just so that it kind of holds it right at the tip so that it doesn't separate there, and then you don't have that wire kind of peeking through. And then I did it again on the way down. I kept adding a little bit more. And then I wasn't really sure how I was going to handle the end, being that it's such a tight, skinny little thing that you're wrapping this cord around. I wasn't real sure how that was going to go. And this, again, is why you want something to protect your fingers, because when it comes time to actually secure this with glue at the end of the rope, you really have to hold it down with your fingers. So I was really wishing that I wouldn't have been so lazy to not walk downstairs and get my finger protectors. I just kept going and going and wanted to get this done. But I do recommend that. So that's what I did. And it does start to fray a little bit at the other end if it's cut. If there's tape on the other end, you can decide whether that tape might make it a little bit harder. I felt like the tape made it a little bit harder to glue down, and it kind of melts the tape at that point because you're really trying to bend it around. So I went ahead and let it fray a little bit, but I just tried to twist it back together and wrap it as best I could with as much glue as I could without making it super obvious. You just have to be really careful, but I again, I recommend the finger protectors. Now, I do apologize because I tend to go off the screen in some of these spots, not realizing. And basically right now I am adding the glue to start the next piece, which again, I tried to take the tape off of because I felt like it was just going to melt the tape and then it wasn't going to hold it. It needed to be glued to the actual cording itself. So this is me just adding glue right at the end of the first one and starting a new one, doing the exact same thing I just did to finish off the last piece and adding the new one. And if I could, I tried to overlap it just a little bit without making it look super bulky there. But that's all I did, and then I continued down to the bottom of the ear. And then again, I just kind of figured it out as I went, how I wanted to wrap that around to make sure that everything was covered. So I kind of ended up doing a loop around the bottom of both of the ears and then did the center. And then I went on to complete the second ear the same way I did the first. And then I worked my way back down. Basically, it's just a lot of wrapping and just wrapping in a way that covers everything. That's all it really is. Super easy DIY. And it turned out I had enough that I could go around and do a second row of cording all the way around. So that's what I did, and I trimmed it off at the end, and I still had just a little bit left. Now, for the bow, you can do lots of different things, but what I chose to do was I took this neutral gingham beigey brown and a pink pattern. I chose to make a loop, figure out how much tail. I'm not the greatest bow direction giver, but I decided I needed just a short little tail because I didn't want it to cover up too much of this bunny. You can choose how many loops you want to do, but you're going to make a loop, pinch where your fingers are, and then you're going to have to twist the ribbon so that you have the good side showing upright again. And then you loop back towards your fingers, twist, and then loop again back towards your fingers, pinch, and add a wire to twist it off. Now, I ended up not having enough ribbon to do the exact same thing on both sides, but I knew that I wanted to put a ribbon on both sides of the same ear so that it looked like it had a finished bow on both sides and you weren't looking at the back from either side of the table. So one of my bows on one side has double loops and the bow on the other side has single loops. Doesn't matter. It turned out just fine. So whenever I have my bow completed, I fold over the edge and I trim a little V out of it. And the little twist in the middle, the wire to twist and hold it together, is kind of temporary because I'm going to do the same thing with a pink bow now, and I'm going to overlap them. So I will have to take that piece of wire back off in order to put this bow. So I did the exact same thing here. And now I'm just going to put the two together. So trim it off. Make sure you twist it off, and then you're going to be able to put the two together, one over the other. So I undid the wire on one of them, and then I was able to wrap it around both. And I tried to get the tails so that they were somewhat opposite of each other, but because both sides of the bunny had slightly different ribbons, they do look a little bit different. But as long as you twist them together, get them nice and tight, then you can play around with them, cut the V's in the pink or top layer of ribbon, and then that excess wire on the back is what you will use to actually attach it to the bunny itself. And I attached mine kind of at the I didn't go up the ear at all. I just kind of attached right where the ear meets the top of the curved round bottom. And then I chose to elevate my bunny with a little cake stand that I had. And the cake stand actually had a red ring around the top of it. It was Christmas themed, but you're never going to see that. And then I took one of the greenery pieces. It's called the Rain Washed Half Sphere, and it's from our online shop. It's a beautiful piece, and it works perfectly on the bottom to fill that in and just give it such a pretty look. And I also have two Irish hops half spheres on either side in that tray, and those are the ones that have the little white flowers. I love how it turned out. Just a little bit of extra. Please subscribe to this channel to watch any future videos that we put up, and follow us on social media over on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, and TikTok. We are also at my_home_matters.